What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Empowered Athlete Podcast. In today's episode, we have Black Belt Mike. I'm chatting with Mr. Mike Alexander. He's a Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's a speaker, UFC commentator, and author of Improve Your Position, which is kind of like his autobiography, which is converting potential into performance. So we're definitely going to be diving into some of those kind of stories and concepts and life principles that he shares in his book. The link to the book will be in the show notes, of course, because I definitely think it's a really quick and easy read that, especially if you're a jiu-jitsu athlete, it's worth the read. I love that he integrated his life story alongside just life principles as well. So it's definitely what I recommend for everyone to try. And so a little bit about Mike. So as I said, his name's Michael Alexander, but he goes by Black Belt Mike. He's a second-degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, a no-nonsense professional speaker who emphasizes the power of facing life's challenges head-on. His philosophy focuses on the importance of personal responsibility and establishing discipline in your life with small improvements to your daily processes. His approach is about cutting through the noise and finding real actionable solutions, embodying the spirit of a fighter both on and off the mats. As I said, he's a commentator for the UFC Fight Pass and VP of operations for a commercial construction company. Is that still accurate?
Yep, that's still right.
All right, awesome.
Might be the busiest guy on the planet.
Yes, he has a crazy travel schedule, so he was able to fit us in, and I'm so grateful to have this conversation. Mike is a symbol of resilience and discipline, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have him on this podcast. And his story, as you'll find when you read the book, is one of constant evolution, resilience, and the power of positive transformation. From a skilled martial artist to a versatile business leader and captivating actor and commentator, his journey is a testament to the idea that potential is a bad word. So I'm excited to dive into that. And that by pursuing discipline in every endeavor and maintaining a positive self-dialogue, that can lead to a life of fulfillment and unexpected opportunities. So thank you, Mike, for being here.
Yeah, I'm officially hiring Natalie as my public relations person.
Oh, all right.
That
Yes,
was
nice.
perfect.
Let's do it. So, as I said, I'm super excited for you to be here. I'd love for those who don't really know you or haven't read the book yet, to just kind of give a brief overview, because obviously you have an intense life story, and it's, you probably feel like you have 10 lifetimes in your life so far. But if you could just start by sharing a brief recount of like your overall life story of what led you to do what you do today.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as you know, you read the book, so it starts out with, I was an abused child, severely abused by my birth mother. I have an older brother and a younger sister. They were not victimized by her, but for some reason it was just me. And so that's kind of how my life started. And you can kind of read about some of my earliest moments and my earliest memories as a child. But my mother tried to drown me a couple of times. And then, my finally moved in with my father, found some athletics and sports that my father got me into. But life with him wasn't great either. He didn't make a lot of money, and he believed in corporal punishment also. But he not as bad as my mom, but it was, if you did something wrong, you got whipped and you got sent to your room. And for whatever reason, that happened every day just about. And so um, it was one of those things where he didn't spend a lot of time wanting to listen to my excuses about what my mom had just put me through. He wanted me to be compliant. And so
Yeah.
moving into my teenage years, I had my father was in a car accident, a head-on collision that killed a 17-year-old girl, and she swerved over into his lane. They hit head on, so my dad was in a wheelchair for a couple of years, and we lost everything. And I'm right in the middle of high school. I'm a sophomore year of high school. I'm an exceptional athlete, and I was playing varsity everything in Texas. That's kind of a big deal. And,
Yeah.
especially being so young as a freshman and sophomore playing varsity everything. And so then the next year, I get involved with a girl. She thinks she's going to get in trouble because we have an intimate night. And, she told her parents that she didn't want to. So I was accused of rape and had to deal with that. Turns out, of course, that wasn't true. We got all that behind us. So everything I'd worked for and everything I thought that I was going to do moving forward. You know, I was excited to get away from my house. I was excited to get, just to move on and start being an adult. But college was just out of the question at that point. So I joined the Navy. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, only to find out that I'm colorblind. So made the best of that. But while I was home on leave, got in a fight, got put on 10 years probation. Fast, then when I was 23, I was dating a girl and she attempted suicide right in front of me with me in bed with her. I mean, less than 6 inches from her. She shot herself. Luckily, she lived, so that may have been more devastating, not only for her, but of course, but for me. And you'll read why in the book. But yeah, so she tried to commit suicide right in front of me, and then a few years after that, I got into another minor altercation that was just a misdemeanor, but it revoked my felony probation for the fight I got into. Ended up getting sentenced to 4 years in prison, which was devastating. Was shocked. The day I went to court, I was expecting to go home that day, and ended up with a 4 year prison sentence. Did 30 months of that. Lost everything of my own that I owned whenever I was in there, and started over when I was 33 years old in 2009 with a $50 check. No shoes, no clothes, no money, no nothing, not a car, nothing. Started over. 2 weeks later, I started jujitsu with Travis Luter, and and it's funny because my time in jujitsu kind of matched my success in jujitsu kind of matched my success personally also.
Mm.
So 2015, I had a black belt and I was a millionaire. And so it was, moving on from that, everything was going great. Life was good. Started building Globe Life Field. My wife of 11 years came in surprisingly, told me she wanted a divorce. And so, and COVID was happening right at the same time. And so, she rightfully so, half of whatever we earned was hers. She helped me build all of it. So we split everything. It was very, very quick. And I was still kind of shocked over it. But I didn't change. I just kept moving forward, kept doing the same thing. And then we, you know, started doing commentary. Seth Daniels and the Fight to Win crew came to stay with me during the summer during COVID because all the shows were in Dallas. There was no spectators, and by chance, I had to do commentary on an emergency for one of the Fight to Win shows. Had fun with it, and halfway through the show, Seth was like, "You're the new commentator," and so during COVID, became the voice of Fight to Win. I mean, that's how everybody knew me. Not everybody had even seen my face, but if they heard me talk, they knew that it was me. And so, kind of became the voice of Fight to Win, which led to later on an opportunity with the UFC, and my career just slowly progressed up, and now I'm the VP of operations for a commercial construction company and the acting COO. And, I do all these things. I wrote this book, I do these speaking engagements. And so, you can see there's a kind of turning point, and jujitsu was a big part of my life. Jujitsu and MMA were a big part of my life and a big part of that turning point in my life. And so a lot of the attributes have to do with jujitsu, but it really had to do with the changes that I made personally. And so that's kind of what the book is about. That's kind of an overview of kind of how I got to where I am now. And it seems like a whirlwind because it seems like June 3rd, 2009 was the date I was released, and it just seems like yesterday. So it's very, very quick.
Yeah, crazy. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely worth reading the book and just all the details. And if that doesn't move you and inspire you already, one of the things I really wanted to start with was it's so easy with what you just shared, to really sit in that victim mentality. It's so easy to kind of fall into the belief that, life is happening to you and not for you. Like you could never predict all the opportunities that opened up for you,
Yeah.
when you were in what you were going through in the moment. Right. And so my question to you is, what advice would you give someone who feels victimized by life? You have a lot of situations that maybe you did even for a period of time feel like a victim, right? You do talk about that a little bit where you kind of had that turning point of like realizing that like I just need to take like ownership of my stuff. But what steps would you recommend to help someone shift out of that victim mentality? Like for those who have, you have big T, little t trauma, things that were out of your control, that just caused your life to spiral in different directions that, you know,
Yeah.
that's a lot, for one person to experience. And, for pretty much a short period of your life, up into your early 20s, you're starting your life over in your 30s, essentially. But that idea of being victimized by life, because I think a lot of people get stuck there and they feel like they don't have that ability to control any whatever happened to them, is what's going to predict their future. And I think you're a great testament that that is not true.
Yeah, it's not. And that's one of the reasons, people who knew, very few people, probably five people since 2009 that I've met knew my story. And so, and that was one of and everyone has told me, you should write a book about this, but I was reluctant about it because of this very reason. I was like, okay, well, I'm past that point in my life. I don't want to revisit that part of my life over and over and over and over. And this to become the identity of Mike Alexander, where it's like, oh, that was the guy who went through all this trauma and now he's successful. I didn't want to be where it felt like I was, in this because it felt like the only people you're going to be dealing with are the people or the people that you're going to get feedback from are the people going through this thing right now. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a behavioral scientist. So I don't really know what, I was like, I don't really know what to say to them. I don't really know. And so, it wasn't until I met Dr. Gino Calora and he kind of gave me some clarity on that and was like, it's not that you have to tell these people, you just have to show them that this is what you did. Because there was a turning point in my life where I started thinking differently. And it was whenever I was in prison for the first 6 months, I was pissed. I was like, I don't belong here. It's somebody else's fault. This girl did this, and fuck my mom, and I was just all these things, and I was like, I was doomed from the start, and I'm surprised I did this well for this long. I went through all those things. I went through everything that probably most people, say to themselves, and probably continue to say to themselves. And so, but there was a point where I just was like, okay, whatever I'm doing isn't working, no matter whose fault it is. So let's put fault aside for just a second. So it's not working for me. This is not what I want. So what do I want? And I didn't really know. I didn't really know what I wanted. I just knew I didn't want that. I mean,
Mm.
I'm in prison. So I definitely don't want to be here. And
Yeah.
trust me, 6 months there will make you want to be anywhere else. There's nothing that will thrust you into change like something like that. It
Yeah.
will thrust you right into changing one way or the other. Because I did have to make the decision. I was like, okay, this is where I am. Do I want to be a gangster the rest of my life? Do I want to learn how to be a gangster while I'm in here and just, kind of play this game?
Yeah.
Or do I want to beat the odds? And do I want to, recidivism is 97%. And so 97% of people who go to prison go back. And so
Yeah.
for at least one term. And so I didn't want to do that. I wanted to beat it. And so first thing is, I met some cool people in there that were guards that I'm still friends with today that we talk about the bracelet that I wear and it's I've had it for 15, 16 years now. And so but it means something. And we'll get to the symbols here in a little bit, but one of them was just like, what do you think you had to do with this? And my first answer was nothing. This is not my fault. And
Yeah.
so, and he was like, well, is that really true? And he's like, let's talk about the action, not, let's not talk about the trauma. Let's talk about the actions. So even if you got, abused by your mom, had you not punched that guy, would you still be here? No. Okay. Even though you'd been abused by your mom, had you not, you know, had this other altercation, would you be here? No. Okay. So it's not about what happened to you, it's about your actions.
Mm.
So it's not about what the potential is you have, it's about performance. And so, how are you performing? And you have to think about this. And I like it talking to athletes because I think they can relate to it. Is like, you do all this preparation so that you can perform. All this preparation for my life has been done so that I can perform. So if you just flip it a little bit to where you're like, okay, all these things happen for a reason. Let's figure out what's wrong with me and my perspectives, and let's see if we can change that. If we can't, then we'll make the decision about we want to be a gangster, we want to be a normal functioning citizen with a good life. And
Yeah.
so I just started diving into that and just started um, I started studying mastery, and I started studying, you know, just getting to know myself. What do I actually like? What do I actually want?
Yeah.
And I replaced some things that I was saying. First of all, the talk that I was having with myself constantly was, God, I'm such an idiot. Why does this keep happening? And I would have those conversations with myself. That was the first thing I cut out. I was like, "You're gonna get better. You're gonna get better. You're gonna get better." I would just replace those, and it's amazing how those words completely flip your mindset. Just those alone is that you're going to get better, you're going to get better, you're going to get better. And even whenever you doubt yourself, if you answer the doubt with you're going to get better, you're going to get better, you're going to get better. And that was the only thing I could think of. That's what I kept telling myself because that's all I could think of. I didn't really know how to do this. I didn't know how to be in a new mindset.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing I replaced. The second thing was anytime I said I can't, I replaced with I'm not willing. And so
Yes.
just that simple thing alone was like, are you gonna do your push-ups today? I can't. Change that with I'm not willing. And you're like, then you start, then you're blaming it on yourself. And you're like, okay, I'm not willing. Why? Why am I not willing to do this? Because I'm tired. Is that a reason not to do it? And so you talk yourself through those things, and it takes a little while. It's awkward conversations with yourself. It's awkward to think this way at first, but then something flips where it's the only way you think. You
Yeah.
stumble through these things, and I know you can relate to this because when you change something, whether it's your physique, whether it's whatever, you there comes a point where, you're like, "Hey, I want to have abs." And you're like, "Okay, abs are about diet." And so you change your diet, but you still eat a little bit of sweets, and you still do a little bit of this, and you still might drink a soda every once in a while. You're not getting the results you want. So eventually you cut those things out little by little until eventually you're eating clean, you're doing all the things, there's your abs. And so your life is exactly the same way. It doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't matter at what pace you do it at. It's just take the first step, do a little piece. And then as you see a little bit of results, you're more likely to cut the stuff out. And then the last part of that is you got to figure out how to do it on the days when you don't want to do it.
Mm.
And that's where the discipline comes in. And that's why I say on my Instagram, I'm not a motivational speaker
Yeah.
because I think motivation's bullshit. It's all over the place right now. Everybody is saying the same thing. Motivation's bullshit. Motivation doesn't work. It's all about discipline. And that's not a trend. That's exactly the way it is. And every successful mentor that I have has told me the same thing. It comes down to discipline. And if you're not willing to do it, if you see somebody that wants something and they tell you this is what I did to get it, if you don't do those things, you have to say, I'm just not willing to do that. It means I'm not willing to sacrifice. I don't have time to go to jujitsu. I'm not willing to go to jujitsu because I'm not willing to give up my TV show. I'm not willing to give up, I'm not willing to suffer through those things.
Yeah.
So if you change I can't with I'm not willing, I think that's a good start. And if you can continue to make yourself do it, man, it helps so much and it changes your perspective really, really quick.
Yeah. I think that languaging shift and that mindset shift is exactly what kind of helps because when you're in that victim mentality and when anyone's in victim mentality, the number one languaging that is used is the I can't.
Yeah.
So the opposite of feeling a victim is taking that personal ownership and responsibility. And with that, there's this element of like choice. And so when you shift that mindset and that language to I'm not willing, to me, like when you say that, that like hits different in my system, right? Like I'm not willing is kind of speaking to that idea of you're choosing not to.
Yeah.
You either choosing not to, or you're choosing, so you're choosing to watch TV or you're choosing not to watch TV. And it really comes down to how connected, in my opinion, you are to the vision that you have for yourself. Like, how bad do you really want it? Because I think a lot of people are like, oh, I want this and this and in their life. But when it comes down to using that language of like, well, are you willing to do this or that? If they're not really willing, then they don't really want that desired outcome. So it's like adjust your expectations or your vision if you're not really willing to make the switch required.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, set their goals as idle ruminations. They're not real. They're not really going toward that. I'm going to make this goal, but that's for Natalie. That's not for me. That's for Natalie. That's so she sees that I've got somewhere that I want to go, and her perception is that I've got somewhere I want to go. All she's doing is trying to help me get there, and I'll decide what I'm willing to do in between until she sees that no, that's bullshit. And then I'll either lower it or I'll hire it or make the decision to stop this, or I'll make the decision to finally do what she says I'm supposed to do. So
Hmm.
they're really just pushing the hard decision. They're kicking the can for the hard decisions down the road. And so
Yeah.
at best, or they're just faking it.
100%, 100%. So, one of the other things I'm curious, what comes to mind when I tell you because one of the things that has shifted for me in my life, discipline has always been something that I've been really good at. I've been a martial artist my whole life, so I was instilled discipline on sports, that has helped with discipline as well. But one of the things that I think really helped me, and maybe you have the same experience, was there's what I consider like a self-critical discipline versus a self-loving discipline. And I'm
Mhm.
curious your thoughts when I say that, like what comes up for you. For me, the critical aspect is like almost forcing yourself to do something from that lens of that negative self-talk of just like I have to, or like if I don't, then I'm a failure. Kind of motivating yourself through fear. And then the other one is more like because you're really committed to the other version of you, like that self, it's an aspect of self-love. Doing the hard thing now is actually an aspect of self-love because, like you said, all change sucks. There's that transition period. So it's never going to feel easy, but it gets easier the more consistent you are with it. So I'm just curious, what comes up for you when I say that critical aspect versus the self-loving discipline and your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean the critical aspect is, to me that's mostly negative self-talk, and you can say the same thing to yourself critically, and you can do it with love. You just got to, as you get better at all these things we're talking about, your self-talk and all these things, as you get better at that, you'll figure out kind of better ways to tell yourself that, you're not doing the right thing. And um, it becomes almost it becomes there comes a point now where these things are painless and they're easy to do because you've done the hard part, and so now it's just, do I really feel like doing this today? And then the answer is never no. The answer is always, I feel like doing this today, I just need this. And so I think there's a big difference between saying it one way, saying just no, I don't want to do this today, and saying yes. Now, sometimes you're going to say it. Sometimes you're just going to say, no, I don't want to do this today. To me, and it only gets more critical on yourself from that way. And that, the further you go down, the more negative it sounds and the more negative it is. And then the other way, as you get into these things and as you see, it almost becomes a game, probably to you too, where you're like, I don't really feel like doing this today, and then we see somebody's face. There's somebody that's got your number, or there's somebody that's got, somebody gives you a hard round every single night and they're there training and you're not. And so you kind of play these games with yourself where you're like, no, 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 I'm not going to let him, I'm
Yeah.
not going to let him do that. So, it's kind of, it's kind of that, or you just reach in and you get the grit that you've built over all these experiences, and you just say, I'm going to do it anyways. You never say no. You're just going to feel that feeling that I don't feel like doing it. And then you're going to stand up and one step at a time and just say, all right, I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to go in here and grab my gi. All right, I'm going to go in here and grab a towel. All right, I'm going to go here. All right, just walk out the door. And then once you walk out the door, once you get in, you're on your way, you turn your music on, you forget that it was that you almost didn't go. And then I know you can relate to this too. 100% of the times I didn't want to go, when I did go, I was always glad I went after it was over. And
Yeah.
so once you do that a few times, because it's hard the first 5 times, maybe the first 10 times or 20 times. But after that, you get the feeling that we're well aware of that, yeah, I hardly ever feel like going. But then after I go, I'm always grateful because it always feels great. I always have a great time. It always clears my head. It always, whatever it does for you. And so, and if it's not that, it's got to be something. It's got to be something that if you're not fulfilled from your job, if you're not fulfilled from, whatever it is that you're doing or whatever it is you're not motivated to do, you'll eventually get that feeling from it, or you'll change what you're doing. And
Mhm.
so, if jiu-jitsu's not it for you, if working out's not it for you, if it's whatever your hobby is, whatever it is that you don't feel like doing that you're doing anyways, I mean, those are these things will leave you eventually. And it happens pretty quick too. I mean, if you think about in the big scheme of things, I mean, you or I could do this 20 times now and not want to do it all 20 times, but we see the feeling it gives us afterwards. 20 times is enough. And we're going to do this thousands of times in our life. And so 20 times is enough for you or I. Sometimes it takes a little more because there's other distractions. People telling you shouldn't do that. People telling you, hey, do this instead. People want you to go back to the way you were. People not wanting you to leave their presence because it makes them feel worse about themselves. So all
Mhm.
those other distractions can come into place. You just have to focus on the result. And this is what it feels like whenever I'm done. Remember yesterday? I didn't want to go yesterday either. It felt great afterwards. I want that feeling again. And you just keep doing it. You build on those experiences and then it becomes easy.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. So, I one of the things that we kind of talked about, like change, and you obviously had a big success story, becoming a millionaire, and with all these connections and stuff. And I truly believe that, and this is the case for a lot of people. When you read autobiographies and things like that, of the breakthrough always comes from the breakdown. And so I
Yeah.
think you had a lot of crazy experiences, but I think that, like you said, prison was kind of one of the biggest turning points for your life. And so with that kind of phrase in mind of, the breakthrough coming from the breakdown, what do you believe was the biggest gift being in prison gave you?
And so I think the entire experience, it was horrible as a whole, but I think the entire experience to be in an environment where I wasn't around anybody I wanted to be like. And
Mm,
so, or I wasn't around anybody who were doing the things that I wanted to do. And so I didn't feel like I met some nice people in there and there were some people, some normal people in there. I mean, trust me, there's murderers in prison that you may have to sleep in a bed next to. And there's a ton of those, you know, big time drug dealers, murderers, rapists, child molesters, everything. They're all around. But then there's also the guy who was driving home, had a few drinks, and hit somebody on a motorcycle. And, it was an accident, but they're good people. They're normal functioning people. So you meet some decent people in there. But as you get to know them or as you try to get to know them, you're like, oh man, they're just, you find out they have all these other vices that,
yeah,
oh, they're good people. Like, I don't want any part of that. I don't want, I don't, and also you see them getting mixed up in the life that's inside those walls.
yeah.
So I wasn't around anybody really that I wanted to be like. The
Mhm.
closest people I could relate to were the guards because they went home and they had families and they had normal lives outside of there. And there's one in particular that I talk about in the book, Javier. And I had him to talk to almost every night. And so we're still great friends today. But I think it was that I didn't have any distractions from thinking about where I wanted to go from there. And
Mm,
so I think that was the biggest gift. It gave me time to reflect. There was nobody there telling me, you can't do it, or I wasn't sharing this transformation with the people around me. This was something within myself. And so, I mean, the fact that I kind of had to do it by myself and there wasn't anybody there to, either talk me into it or talk me out of it, I think
yeah,
that was the best. I think if I would have tried to make this transformation outside and, just around my friends from high school or the people I hung around, a lot of them would have been like, why would you want to do that? You're out of your mind.
yeah,
You're cool now. We like you the way you are. And, you find out that they like you the way they are because that's how they are, and they don't want you to change because they don't want to feel bad about themselves. They don't want to lose you as part of the group.
yeah.
And so, you know, it was that, and then also, the mentality that, I did not, even though I'd been convicted, I did not want to be a convict. I never
Mm,
wanted to be seen as that I never wanted to have that label on me. And
Yeah.
so, and that's why until the book came out, I mean, uh, like I said, maybe five people knew about what happened to me, and nobody knew that about me, and nobody would have guessed it about me either.
Yeah.
So, um, so yeah, I think that was probably the biggest gift, but there were several. I mean, they're just, from kind of learning who your friends are. And, when
Yeah.
I went in, I would have thought, you know, 500 people are going to write me letters and send me money and check on me and all that. Nope, none of them. You'd write them nothing. People that you spent your whole life with, people you cared about, people that you thought cared about you, they don't. And so that realization that, no matter what, I'm in this by myself. This is my life. I'm responsible for it. Nobody's helping me. Nobody's going to push me in or out. I make my own decisions. And, when everything's good, everybody's all around. When everything's are really, really bad, I mean, people don't want any part of it. They just
Mhm.
think they feel like it's contagious or something. They just don't want any part of it.
Yeah. It really just shines that light on like the real and the honesty, the self-honesty too. Like you said, you have nobody to turn to, nobody that you can, put on or, seek advice from external. If there's nobody there, you're forced to kind of be with yourself.
Yep.
And there might be some ugly pieces that you kind of have to address that are your own. And I think the acceptance of that, the being open to kind of like, I think that's the first step is like the acceptance of like shit, like you said, the actions that I took, even though, I'm a big believer that the trauma we've been through is not our fault, but it is our responsibility,
Yeah.
you know, to really shift that and change our life to realize that we have the power to change, not change what happened to us, but change our future by what we do in the present.
Yeah, for sure.
And we can only really do that when we have honest self-reflection. And being in prison where you're forced to kind of be by yourself, I mean, there's no other way where like, it's nice to do it when you can do it in your room on a Sunday night, but like in prison, that's a different type of universe forcing that self-reflection on you where you're like, well, shit, I mean, I got nowhere else to be, nothing else to do. I really got to get real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's a very unforgiving place, and I don't want to downplay how dangerous it can be, and I got in a couple fights in there, and it's kind of because you have to,
Yeah.
um, but I mean it's a dangerous, dangerous place. So being quiet, kind of keeping to yourself is pretty easy in there. Just what you do
Yeah.
with the time is, and kind of how you talk to yourself. That's the tricky part. So
Yeah.
if you can get into a mindset that I want to figure this out about me so I can change. Um, you know, I don't suggest, I don't want anybody out there thinking, you know what, I'll just go to prison, man. That'll give me the time that I need. Because no, there's better ways to do it. So just
We're learning from Mike's experience.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Learn as much as you can from my experience so you don't have to experience it yourself. Because it's an awful place, and it's very dangerous. And I was lucky to come out. I was lucky things happened the way they did while I was in there, and I was lucky to come out unscathed. So
Yeah.
that part I'm happy about.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit because of again, one thing you talk about a lot is this idea of feeling like you have potential or being told you had potential. And the kind of subtitle to your book is converting potential into performance. And
Mhm.
so this may have been covered in what we've talked about so far, but just kind of the idea of for those who maybe have that same experience, who they're constantly told they have the potential, the potential, the potential. What do you believe are the keys to shifting that potential? Like maybe it is just coming back to that self-ownership. Maybe there's some other things, but making that shift from converting the potential into performance.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I started thinking about, what people had told me and what I was most disappointed about and what I kept coming to was, I'm disappointed that I never lived up to the potential that everybody kept telling me I had as an athlete, as an employee, as a business owner. There other people could see that I was smart. They could see that I was, aggressive. They could see all these things about me that I didn't see about myself. And
Yeah.
so I think the first thing, I think potential should, when somebody tells you you have the potential, that should be a trigger word. Because for me, I thought, there was a lot of currency in potential, and there's not. Potential is worth nothing
Mm,
unless you convert it to performance. And
mm,
so potential doesn't really mean anything. I mean, I could sit here and say, Natalie, this has the potential to be a great podcast and you have billions of viewers.
yeah,
But if you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm just not going to make any more until I have a billion viewers. If you think I have that potential, then I'm just going to wait until I have a billion viewers. That's just not the way it works. And
yeah,
so, how many overnight successes do we know that we know for a fact they've been working on this shit for 15 years? And
yeah.
so, I was an overnight success at 37 or 38. And
Love
so
when people
I had to go
say
through
it. They
all
frame it
these
like that.
things. And they're like, yeah, you just came out of nowhere. You blasted on the jiu-jitsu community and, you started winning world championships and, you had a lot of money and this just happened overnight for you. And you're like,
If only
so
you.
yeah. And so I would tell people if anybody tells you have potential to do something, that's a trigger word. There's no currency in that. And what they're telling you is that, you could be these things, but you're not doing everything that you could do to get there. Now, sometimes the only thing you're missing is just time. And so you just got to keep doing what you're doing and just pay your dues and, wait the amount of time. But I think there's a fine line between waiting for your time and procrastination. And so you have to figure out which one you're doing. And is it just not my time yet, or am I procrastinating? Is there something else I can do to get there? And you have to be exploring these things constantly.
Yeah,
And I mean daily. It and eventually, once you get to a point where your mindset's right, again, I said it earlier, these things are easy. They come easy. You start henpecking like, I'm going to do this, 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 and this today because you're so efficient with your time and you're more efficient with your thoughts. You're more efficient. You don't get lost in, kind of daydreaming about what you want to be instead of actually performing on it. And
yeah,
so, there is a fine line between those two. You have to figure out, am I just paying my dues or am I procrastinating? And so because it's easy to fall on those, you know, I I don't want to do this yet because I'm just waiting for my time. It's like, nope, you're procrastinating. And
yeah,
so I would challenge anyone. If someone tells you have the potential to be something, that's a trigger word. That is not positive. That is, matter of fact, immediately I would dig into that. Tell me what you mean by that. Tell me what else you think I could do. Tell me what else you think I could. People who tell you have potential are trying to be a mentor to you.
mhm,
And if a mentor is good, anytime I've mentored very few people, and the reason is because I ask them what their goals are before. I ask them what they're grateful for. I ask them for all these things because I want to know that they're grateful for what they have. They're grateful for what they're doing. They're grateful for all these things first. And then also, it is a requirement. If I mentor someone, I have to know that they're going to pass me up. They're gonna outgrow me one day. They're gonna find their identity, and I'm not gonna be a mentor anymore. I'm gonna be, then I'm going to be a counterpart to them. I'm going to be, a colleague or something like that, where even if they're in a different, you know, they're going to outgrow me. And if I don't see that I think they'll outgrow me, that I can mentor them until they outgrow me. Because if they just want to go up to where I am, I don't want to hold them. I don't want to be that ceiling. And
yeah,
so, there's a lot of people that have started after I did that are further than I am. And so that part of it doesn't really matter. It's, the making your life, your journey. But you have to be serious about it. You want to have fun with it, but I think you have to take those things seriously because, I mean, how long do we have to do this in a healthy body? I mean, we're 12 years old when we start doing, kind of athletic things, and if you're great and you're lucky, 55 or 60. So you've got like a 50-year period in there where your body is functioning well. You can do all these things at a semi-productive rate. And so that's a really short window for in a lifetime, especially if you live 75, 80, 90 years, 50 years of that is a short amount of time. It's almost half of your life, only half of your life that you're able to actually do these things and be productive at it. So And then, if you're still trying to be productive and still trying to produce at 75, something went wrong. And so you should be
Yeah.
enjoying those years. And, there's some point in your career where if you're still doing it, it should be because you want to, not because you have to.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really curious to hear like kind of your perspective of like seeing potential as a bad thing because for me, like I actually have a positive connotation with the word potential. But
Mhm.
when you explain it that way, I was kind of reflecting and I'm like, you know what? Like that is so true. The first thing that came to mind is just the idea of in basic science of like potential energy versus
Mhm.
like kinetic energy, right? Like
Yeah.
potential energy, it can just build up, build up, build up, but there's no like actualization of that energy. It's just like all of this that can happen, but it doesn't actually happen.
Yeah.
It shifts into that action step, and that action step is what converts it from potential to kinetic. So it was just like interesting thing of like, oh, and the kinetic energy is actually what's, propelling whatever it is in motion.
Yeah.
But if you don't never take that step, you just have a massive amount of potential energy
Yeah.
that's going nowhere. Just
Yeah.
building, right? So that was just a interesting perspective. And I kind of agree with you now, just kind of hearing that. Because again, for people who maybe were in my boat of seeing it as a potentially positive word, well, then if you are seeing it as a positive word, I can see how people never act because they're like kind of holding on to that as
Right.
like positive feedback or like, oh, I have a lot of potential, like
Yeah.
go through life thinking they have a lot of potential, but there's no actualization of anything. And then that, can lead to that internal frustration because they're like, well, all this potential like you experience, but like, where the hell are the results? And
Yeah.
I think they're missing the piece of like, it's like you said, it's a guideline. It's like a, you know, like little trigger for you to start taking action, assess the actions that you're taking, because that is the key to shift the potential energy into the kinetic energy, which is what's going to actually create the results that you want. But you can't just ride on the potential energy because there's nothing actually happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Potential is static. You're sitting there on your potential. I mean, it's like, sitting on a toy horse. You know, it's until you get on a real horse, it's gonna, there's really not much. You're not gonna go anywhere. And I think you're right. I think most people see it as a positive because they see that they, because with a lot of people, potential is currency. They hire you, they mentor you, whatever on your potential. But that goes away when it doesn't convert. If it doesn't convert to performance, eventually they will push you away and they will stop because they think that what they saw in you, that potential was either false or fabricated. So
Yeah.
so it goes away. Potential is short lived. You have to start to perform.
Love that. So I wanted to kind of wrap up with some of the truth bombs that you share in the book of one of the ones you kind of hinted at a few minutes ago of speaking to the idea of patience. And so
Mhm.
one of your things is it takes patience to win at the game of life. So tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about, in a world where short-term gratification, is what everybody's seeking. This isn't the most sexiest principle, because patience is not sexy, but I'd love to hear your perspective on, obviously the long game, which you were forced into.
Yeah. Yeah, and I said it a while ago, there's a fine line between patience and procrastination. And so if you're procrastinating, that'll show in the results. And so, but when I was in prison, I went to this school and I ended up being like a teacher's assistant, and we used to talk all the time. And um, she told me, she's like, one thing I want you to remember whenever you go out, because if it's worse than you think when you get out there, as far as what you're going to have, how you're going to start over, the kind of job you'll be able to get. She kept telling me, repeat it to yourself over and over. Results take time to measure. And goes back to what we said earlier. I want to have abs. Well, there's nothing you can feed them. There's no exercise you can do. There's nothing that you could do to give them abs tomorrow. And so it's kind of the same thing. It's you're in the about the same pace you can build your body. That's about as fast as you can build your mind. And so, but if you don't exercise your mind and you don't exercise your body, you're not building any of those. And
Yeah.
so you have to be patient with it, but you have to walk the line between patience and procrastination, and just make sure that you're not just calling it patience, but just sitting on the sidelines and being like, yeah, I'm being patient. No, you're procrastinating. And
Yeah.
so if you're not constantly in action toward whatever it is you're working for, I don't even think you have to know. I think there's like a big bubble out there with all these things that you could be in it. And it's over there, start working that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you'll, as you get closer, you'll dial in on exactly what those things are, but at least start going that way. And if you're not in constant motion that way, you're not willing to do what it takes to go to that space.
Yeah.
And no matter what those obstacles are that come up, if it's work, if it's whatever, if you're not willing to do that, you're procrastinating. You're taking time off from getting to the place where you're telling everybody, you're telling your mentors, you're telling people who are spending time on you, you're telling people who are supporting you, you're telling people you're going there. And if you're not, eventually, one by one, they're going to start to fall off. And so if you don't want that to happen, you have to continue to move that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like the patience piece is you're still taking actions, but you're maybe releasing the timeline, or not setting like a timeline that, like you said, is, unrealistic. You're just kind of being committed to the process, being committed to the actions, and trusting that in showing up and doing those actions, something is going to come of it because you're taking actions, versus the procrastination. I think there's just the lack of action.
Yeah. And relating this to jiu-jitsu, Natalie, I know you can relate to this, but this is why blue belts quit. In
Oh, yeah.
jiu-jitsu, blue belts are like notorious for like, oh, I got my blue belt. Girls start to like them, they whatever, guys start to like them, whatever, they quit. We'd never see them again. Now they can beat up all their friends, so they quit. And I think the reason is because they focus on the promotion. They
Yeah.
focus on, okay, I just want to go till I get my blue belt, then I'll make a new goal. So that's their goal, and they don't really focus on the journey at all. They just focus on that. And then whenever you get your blue belt, you see, oh my God, I don't know any more than I did yesterday as a four-star white belt, and I still have a long ways to go. And I think
Yeah.
that is too daunting for people. I think it's like my goal is short term, and I'm gonna get to this, and then I'll make my goals and figure out what I want to do from there. No, raise your height, raise your sights, and black belts the goal always. And just embrace the journey of getting there. It's going to suck. It's going to be hard. It might take 10,000 hours. It's all those things that, you're told they're going to take. And the speed you get there at is what you're willing to do to get there faster. The more focused you are, the faster you're going to get there.
Exactly.
And and if and that's why people quit as a blue belt. They focus on that promotion, realize how far away the rest of it is, and they're like, yeah, I'm just not willing to do that, for the next 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I tell everybody this. I don't care what you're doing in your life. And this is not mine. This is my coach Travis Luter. He told us this all the time. He said, if whatever you're doing, I don't care what your profession is, whatever you're doing in 10 years, you'll be better at it and you'll be a better person if you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu. So I don't know
Yeah.
if we can exactly put our finger on it about what it is about getting to that point. I think it has a lot to do with humility and all these other things along the way. There's always somebody in there, even when you're a black belt, that you go in there and you think all of a sudden you're like, God, everything's going so good. And, you know, my life is good. I'm a purple belt now. And they come in there and Natalie beats them up. It's a, I think it's a humility in your life that you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
well, let me erase all these good things I think about myself. Let's refocus here and let's come back down to reality a little bit and let's start working harder and harder and harder and
Yeah.
harder. So I think that's why mastery and jujitsu and kind of this building of your life. I think if you apply the principles of jujitsu to your life, you'll see that, and that's where the name of the book came from, Improve Your Position. It was a coaching command. It was just, stop trying to get it all back at once. You lost the position. Stop trying to get it all back at once. Improve your position a little bit. Move a little bit at a time. Now you've got some space. Now create a scramble. Then you get into a positive space and you start working from there.
Yeah.
And so, it, that's why I think jujitsu follows life so well. And I think that's why people fall in love with it once they do it,
Yeah.
or they hate it. And they're like, I have to apply all these principles to this room that I don't like. I don't do them in my life. I don't, so I'm not going to do them here. so they quit. So yeah, I think that you know, the truth bombs, that's exactly what they are. They're bombs because they will they'll blow up and then they'll either push you away or you'll dive on it and figure out that the blast is not as bad as you thought it was going to be.
Yeah. The other one was you have to suffer to get better.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think that speaks for itself. It's suffering
That's some
is
sacrifice.
yeah, suffering and sacrifice are just part of anything you're good at. Uh, Nobody is, it's kind of like we talked about the overnight success earlier. The suffering and sacrifice that people have gone through to get to that point where now you know who they are, or or they're accomplishing something. There's a lot of suffering that goes into life. There's a lot of suffering that goes into training, to bodybuilding, to whatever you want to be good at. There's nothing that people are great at that doesn't require some kind of suffering and sacrifice. And I would challenge anybody that says that they have an example of something that's not that way. I'll have that 30-second debate with anybody any day because it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Um, I think that, as humans, we have this innate biological um kind of thing put in place where we naturally avoid pain
Yeah.
and pleasure. So we
Yes.
try to avoid suffering and seek the good stuff. But so naturally there's a little bit of that resistance, a little bit of like that pain that we experience when we're doing something new or making a career change or got our blue belt but now we realize there's so much of a gap to get to our purple belt. There's just like a little bit of that suffering and we're so quick to that's what, like you mentioned, resilience. I think that's what we're so quick to just be like, give up.
Hmm.
But pushing through that is what builds that resilience, which expands our capacity to be able to just deal with more suffering as we continue to kind of move forward and improve.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell everybody that I never finished college, so I went for a little while I was in the military, but I never finished. But I tell everybody, I have a degree, I have a doctorate in making hard decisions under extreme duress. I mean, as a black belt, as a brown belt, we're in that room every day. We're making decisions like sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes it's not, you got to make decisions quick. And especially
Yeah.
in competition, you got to make decisions quick and it's under a lot of stress. It's why you're tired. And that's why I think it's so good for your brain, so good for your everyday life, because those decisions are like, well, there's not another 240-pound man trying to break my arm or, neck or whatever. It becomes easy after that. And so yeah, I think once you get into that, and like I said, even if it's not jujitsu, it's got to be something that challenges you because you want to have those situations where you're challenged outside of your comfort zone so that you know how you'll react. So in
Yeah.
any other parts of your life, you're probably going to react the exact same way. So if you get conditioned to reacting well under pressure, no matter what the situation is or what kind of pressure, probably going to react well in every part of your life.
Yes, 100%. And then this is obviously pretty self-explanatory too, but I'm a big fan of repetition as well.
Mhm.
So let's end our last truth bomb on repetition works, just to kind of really anchor it into those people that trying to take the shortcuts.
Yeah, I mean, there's a thousand sayings about it. Jiu-jitsu, drillers make killers, and you know all those things. It's repetition of those things, and if you can repeat the things that have made you successful, from one of the things I did immediately was I started thinking about I was going to go home. I was going to live with my parents. I didn't have any money. I was depending on my father for a job at the time. What can I do to contribute? And so the I didn't have money. I didn't have any of those things. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna make sure that my room and my bed are clean. So every morning put my feet on the ground and I make my bed. I turn right around and make my bed. You're less likely to get back into it if it's made. And so as soon as my feet touch the ground, I make the bed. And it made my room look clean. It made it look neat. And at least they wouldn't walk in there and be like, oh God, he's living here for a while and his room's a mess. And
Yeah.
so I did little things like that, and I repeated that every day, and I would add something. And now I'm big on symbolism too. So I put things all around my house. I carry a rock in my pocket that's this big. When I put it in my pocket in the morning, I say out loud everything I'm grateful for. And then throughout the day, if I reach in my pocket for my chapstick or whatever, I reach in there. If I touch the rock, I just real quick in my head repeat to myself what I'm grateful for. And I've been doing that for 11 years.
Yeah.
And, now it's like it's constantly on my mind, but I still carry it. But
Yeah.
it's one of those things that you repeat and it becomes, easier and easier and easier. You really are grateful for what you have and you have these goals for where you're going. And so it never lets you lose perspective on how grateful you are for the things that you have here, because it's easy to go back and think about, all right, you know, in 2009,
Yeah.
$50 check, no shoes, no nothing. Now I have this. And, the life that I was praying for, wishing for, all those things I have now. And
Yeah.
so that's something you really need to be grateful for, because you have to remember that these things that you were wishing for at one time in your life, you have right now. And
Yeah.
so if you think about that daily, it's really hard to get into something negative where because you don't have something else. And
Yeah.
and I repeat those things every single day. I have markers all over my house. If there's a piece of glass anywhere in my house, it probably has notes on it. So something I want to talk about in a speaking engagement, something I want to apply to my employees at work, I'll just write it down because I'm so flighty. If an idea
Yeah.
comes to me, I want to write it down right where I'm at. So they're all over my back window, my mirrors in my bathroom, my mirror in my room. You'll see things all over it. So I think some of those things, like having symbols around my house, I have a genie lamp that I look at every day. And behind that is, I heard a guy say, imagine all the negative things that you're saying. Imagine if there was a genie there that said, your wish is my command. So you say, damn it, I fucking suck at this. Boom, your wish is my command. You suck at this. And so
Mm.
if you think about it that way, you think about this genie coming out and you think about this, you eventually, it sounds stupid at first, but eventually you're like, all right, I'm going to watch what I say, because honestly,
Yeah.
that's what's happening versus listening to you. It's feeling what you're putting out. It's going to give it right back to you. And
Yeah.
so I think you have to be careful about those things. And I think repeating these things, even if they're not actual physical things, repeating these things daily just makes it part of your life. And once it's part of your life and you never go back to the old way of life, it completely changes your perspective on the way it is. And you don't even realize it. You just look up one day and you're like, I don't even know the person I was 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, especially.
Yeah.
So, and pretty soon you go 3 years without thinking about one bad thing. And there's not a lot of people that can relate to that. But when it happens to you, you're like, this is the
Yeah.
greatest feeling in the world. And then
Yeah.
when traumatic things do happen, they don't have the same effect on you. You have coping mechanisms for this. You're not going to go back to some bad habits or some addictions or whatever it is that you may have leaned on before. When you're not going to go back to those, it's the greatest feeling in the world. Especially like I said, if you've gone 3, 4, 5 years without a single negative thought that you can think of, and it's a really, really good feeling.
Super empowering.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for just sharing your wisdom, your perspective, and just your story. Again, for those listening, I'm going to put his Amazon. Is that the best link for your book? Amazon?
Yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or they can go to blackbeltmike.com and there's a link there that takes them straight to the Amazon site, I think. But it's available at every book retailer, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, available everywhere. The audiobook, I just finished the last studio session on Saturday, so it'll be available probably in a couple of weeks. So look for it around the 1st of April. So the audiobook will be out, and I know a lot of people have been asking for that. Apparently, people don't like to read. And the feedback I got on the book was whenever people read it, they could hear it in my voice. So
Yeah.
it had to be me that read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I tortured through the 9 hours of studio time to get it done. But I'm so happy it was me, and I'm so happy I was able to get it done. But yeah, blackbeltmike.com will get you there. You could, if you want to send me an email about a speaking engagement, a jiu-jitsu seminar, whatever you want to do, or you just want some advice, just send me up at blackbeltmike.com. There's a contact me that comes straight to me. And I try to answer all the emails that I get.
Awesome. And then of course I'll also put his Instagram on there. Do you hang on Instagram
Yeah, I
pretty?
mean, yeah,
I mean,
so
it's busy, so
yeah, Instagram's the main one, and I have somebody that does some posts for me, and then I keep up with it myself. Not ready to let it go completely. But yeah, Black Belt Mike 99 on Instagram, and then I have a Twitter, but I'm hardly ever on there.
I don't
And
know if that's even relevant anymore.
yeah, so but yeah, Instagram's the main place. That's where I post most of my stuff. And yeah, really happy to be here. Really happy, Natalie. I know we've kind of known of each other for the last 10 years or so, but it's really happy that we're training together and I finally get to meet you in person. You're
Yes.
great in person as you seem to be online. So I really appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. And as it has it, the universe brought us together to be able to do this. And I'm really excited for people to be inspired by your story and, just get to connect with you too. So I
Yep.
hope that you have an amazing rest of your day. And thank you guys for listening. As always, if you have any golden nuggets, anything that came through, as you listen to the episode, feel free to tag us on Instagram, Body by Boss LLC, and his Instagram as well. And we'd love to kind of just repost and share. We love when our listeners are listening to the episodes and taking some, nuggets away that they can apply to their life. There's a lot that he shared that wasn't just wisdom to listen to, but again, I think he would attest as well. A big kind of common factor of both of us is it's not just about learning these things, it's about implementation and taking action, right? And that's a big thing I want you to take away is whatever it is that resonated with you, how can you apply it and take action, because ultimately that's what's going to initiate the change in your life. So thanks again, Mike, for being here, and thanks guys for listening. See you in the
All
next
right.
episode.